This is One on One with Jasper Cole, Hollywood's bad guy, and so much more. Actor, talent manager, producer, and more. Now he's sitting down with today's top newsmakers from entertainment, politics, pop culture, and beyond. This is One on One.
All right. Howdy, and welcome to One on One with Mr. Jasper Cole. Here we are live from Sunset Gower Studios right here in Hollywood, California. Hey, JW, producer extraordinaire.
Hello.
It's another Wednesday.
Yes, it is. Another Wednesday into November.
And it's almost
Movember.
And it's almost Christmas.
Looks like you're wearing the Movember.
Oh, right.
Right. Mustache.
Right. There we have it.
November.
I want to say, everyone, please follow us on Twitter, One-on-One J. Cole, and Facebook, One-on-One with Jasper Cole, website, jaspercole.com, or go to ubnradiotv.com to my host page where you can take a look at our 24 advertisers. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't have a job, right?
Right.
Go there, find something you like, click on it, and we all get credit for that. So I want to get right to our very special guest today. We are feeling very educated today. We have to be on our best behavior because we have an attorney in the house. It's always good to have an attorney, either in the family or somewhere, right? Please welcome prominent malpractice attorney, Mr. Neil Howard. Hey, buddy. Was that a nice enough introduction?
Perfect.
I didn't want to go too overboard. Well, first of all, congratulations on your big case that you just won with Garden Grove Hospital, the big Orange County case. Do you want to talk about that? It was in the press.
Happy to talk about whatever you'd like.
Yes. So it was a $5.2 million total, right?
Actually, that's not true.
That's not true.
What happened was...
Yeah, tell everyone.
Okay, there was a lawsuit filed against two doctors in the hospital.
Right.
And the case went to trial in Orange County Superior Court. It was an 8-week trial.
Okay.
And the people that brought the suit was the husband and a 1-year-old child and a 4-year-old child of this beautiful, intelligent, lovely
Very
woman.
sad case, yeah.
And she died, allowed to bleed to death in a hospital following a routine C-section. And ultimately, the jury found that the obstetrician was negligent. He left this patient in the intensive care unit.
Abandoned, yeah.
He left this patient that was in critical condition, that was actively bleeding, that was unstable, and went home and didn't even call the patient. And within 2 hours, she essentially died. And the jury came back with an award. It wasn't $5.2 million. It was actually $9.5 million present value.
Wow.
And $17.5 million future value. And it's complicated between future value and present value. But essentially, it would be like if the doctor was to pay right now one check, he'd have to pay $9.5 million. Future value, because in California, doctors are the only one that get this benefit that if they hurt somebody, they can pay what they owe over a period of time. You and I don't get that benefit.
Like an installment plan.
Exactly. With the hope that the person that they're going to pay is going to die. Because if all my clients die, the payments stop. But of course, they're 1 year on the
California is the only state?
I can't tell you about every other case.
But I mean, they have a special thing.
It's crazy. I know it's crazy. And doctors are the only one that get that benefit. So it's $17.5 million future value, $9.5 million present value.
Wow.
So it's a huge award. And I mean, it was a huge damage.
Is there a way for him to appeal it? Or
anybody could appeal anything in the United States.
Right.
The chances, in my opinion, of having a successful appeal are almost zero.
Right.
And if he was to appeal it, he would have to post a bond 1.5 times the judgment.
Oh.
The chances of this person posting a bond, I think you have a better chance somebody that's famous walking into the room and giving me a hug.
Well, no, this is a civil case. There's no chance he can't be charged criminally for.
Well, unlikely he could be charged, but doctors in California are rarely charged with any criminal conduct. I mean, the only time and I'm much older than you, unfortunately.
I doubt it.
And okay, so we're equal age.
Right.
And maybe in our lifetime, there's been 1 or 2 doctors that have been charged criminally. Of course, the one with the Michael Jackson, that's an example.
Who
right?
just died recently. No, Conrad.
Yeah,
I'm thinking of the plastic surgeon.
Okay, yes,
Yeah.
okay.
Let's not kill off
That's
Conrad,
one.
yeah.
And last week there was, I think, a doctor for over-prescribing pain medicine. That may be 2 in the last 30 years.
Good point.
Okay,
so they are able to always sort of
wiggle out.
So, and also we had talked earlier, there's a case where if the children are under 14, you're able to make the case go a little faster.
All cases.
Okay.
All cases where a party plaintiff
Right.
is under a specific age 14, they get a preference, just as certain people over 70 get a preference.
Okay.
So those of us between the ages of 14 and 70 have to wait in the long line.
We're just-
There's a short line, this express line for people
For
under 14
expediting
and
the
over
case.
70, yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So,
It's like the carpooling.
well, in just reading about the case, the hospital settled with the family prior to the actual trial. Is that true?
Well, that's an area that I'm really not supposed to get into.
Okay.
I'm happy to talk about the case. It was an 8-week trial, essentially against the obstetrician,
Right.
who, you use the word abandon.
Well,
He went home while this patient was bleeding. He even went so far during the trial to say that she was in the intensive care unit, and there's a monitor and patients in the intensive care unit.
Right.
And I asked him in front of the jury, did you utilize that data on the monitor, decide whether or not you should go home or maybe take her back to surgery? And he had the audacity to say no.
just
It's kind
no.
of shocking. No. So he's connecting a patient to a monitor in the ICU and not using that information. And I try to explain to the jury either a couple of things were going on. Either he's lied to us,
Right.
he's stupid, or when he was in medical school and the class was how to save a patient's life, he was sick that day.
Wow.
I can't think of any other explanation. Somebody would be so callous to a beautiful woman.
What did his attorneys have a defense for that?
Yeah, she was fine. That was his defense, that she was fine. That this woman with an O2 saturation, which means nothing to your viewers, of
Right,
course.
right.
You and I would have a 96%. She was 89%. This is a patient with heart rate was 149. Your heart rate and my heart rate may be 65. Your blood pressure probably is about 125 over 80. Hers was 90 over 37. He had all this data that you would think that he was educated, would indicate to him that she's bleeding. And he went home and she bled to death.
And weren't
in 2
the
hours.
nurses calling him also? There was some evidence that they made phone calls.
They
to him?
called a different doctor because they felt like he was such a moron that why call him? He knew her condition and did nothing.
Wow.
It's shocking. It's really shocking. And I think that's one of the reasons that the jury gave such a huge amount. I mean, it's a huge verdict.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, in California, you don't get that many verdicts in
Malpractice.
this amount. First of all, it's hard to prevail against a
Right.
doctor to begin with, let
Right.
alone in these numbers. The jury must have felt that
Felt
this
it.
person was unbelievable.
Well, is the hospital responsible also? Was he an employee of the hospital, or he was an independent doctor?
We
who
have the
just
term
was
independent
using-
contractor.
Was using the hospital. I mean, that was her choice to be there or whatever.
I don't know about her choice. I mean, she selected the doctor.
And
She
that's
didn't
where-
select the hospital. Most people, when they go to a surgeon,
Right.
do not select the hospital.
Right. So
But-
the hospital was not liable for anything.
Well, they're certainly not liable for his conduct.
Right.
Let's leave it at that.
Okay. Or is there a suit against them separately?
They
Or-
were initially
Oh.
in the same suit because
So they're all-
because you're supposed to have one judgment against everybody. You can't have multiple suits over
I
the same
see.
instance.
So they're included as together.
Not really, but it's a little
So-
complicated.
So let's talk about your background. You're from New York.
Actually,
Mass-
originally from Massachusetts and New York.
So we heard it because I heard a little bit of an accent.
Right. So that's why I'm a Red Sox fan and a Jet fan.
Right. Well, that's good.
Okay, a little of both.
Sorry. Yeah. So how did you end up in California? Did you?
I decided that I enjoy nice weather. So
Yeah.
I came out here with like a lot of people for the sunshine.
Do you still practice back east?
No, I've never practiced. I'm only licensed
you
in
only
California.
licensed in California.
Exactly.
Okay. Did you go to school here?
I went to school here.
And you've been 20 plus years.
I've been an attorney for over 30 years.
And doing malpractice the whole time? Or?
I would say probably about 27 years.
So this one I want to talk to you about because I've had 6 years. I've went through a legal situation, suing some people, half of Hollywood. So my feelings about attorneys have not been great for the last 6 years.
Yeah, I don't understand that. why
Can
people
you
have that.
imagine
I don't
how that is?
understand why.
And
Because my case is a perfect example.
Right.
I personally invested, pick a number, 4,000 hours of my time
Right.
and invested over $100,000 of my money to help this family
sure.
and maybe not be successful. There's
Right.
no guarantee in
No.
any case that you're going to prevail.
No.
You can have the best facts and the best witnesses and maybe not the best jurors and maybe not the best judge or
Right.
whatever. They don't like my ties, right? So despite all that investment
Right.
and hard work, I don't know why people would think that I'm not admirable. They somehow or another have a great reputation.
But you know, I guess my question is, when you was law something you were always interested in? Is that something that you wanted to do from an early age?
No.
I'm always fascinated what brought you to law or law school.
I thought it'd be challenging. I
yeah.
thought it'd be intellectually gratifying. I used to be a CPA.
Okay.
So
You were CPA and then you went to law school?
right, I found putting those numbers into small boxes was very difficult. So I decided to maybe use my brain more.
Okay. And then was malpractice a particular area that you immediately went into, or how did you get over there? I know it's
One of my best friends is a physician, and he recommended that I do medical malpractice, and he
Okay.
said he would initially help me.
what areas had you been in prior?
I did personal injury,
Personal.
and I represented hospitals and doctors.
Interesting. So you've seen it from both sides.
I have,
Yeah.
and I've represented doctors.
Which do you prefer now? Being on the other
Well, you know, as what I do now,
Right,
I can
I
pick
mean-
and choose my clients.
Right.
Where people who represent doctors don't necessarily have that luxury of picking and choosing their clients. They may have a bad client or bad
Right.
facts, and they still have to, claim the person did nothing wrong.
Right.
If I don't think my client deserves their day in court, I
Then
don't
you
have to
don't
accept
take-
them as a
right,
client.
right.
So I'm in a better position than most attorneys. I can be
Right.
selective as who I want to invest my time in. And
Yeah. And you can say yes or no.
yeah.
Yeah, because that's I think that's a dilemma a lot of people have with attorneys. And you're not here to. First of all, Neil's not here to speak for all attorneys.
Correct.
Or,
100%.
When I'm telling in my this is like a therapy session. When I'm telling in my experience, but it's more about. I've always been fascinated with how an attorney's able to take a case. There's that line where you're not supposed to know if you don't have to know if they're guilty or innocent. You just have to know how to defend them, one way or the other. Because
That's a criminal case.
criminal case. Yeah.
This is a civil case.
Totally different. But my case was civil as well. But there's this whole thing about in California, it's very hard for the state bar. It's when you were mentioning about doctors, it's hard for doctors to get in trouble in California. I have this opinion that it's very hard for attorneys to be disciplined in California.
I think it's harder for doctors. I'll give you an example of this
Right.
case. This is a terrible case.
I mean,
this is astonishing. This is just astonishing. We have this terrible, terrible, terrible doctor,
right.
totally incompetent, killed this beautiful woman. And if you went on the internet, this isn't the first episode of him hurting somebody.
Right.
And he's still practicing.
Right.
Still practicing. Now, they threw him off staff at Garden Grove Hospital. Astonishes me that another hospital would allow him privileges to perform surgeries.
So
It
he's
is-
still working at other places?
Well, last I know, I haven't seen him today, but my sense is at least last week he was. So he's still performing
He's still
surgery,
performing.
still delivering babies, still. I think there should be a sign next to his door. You know that sign
Right.
on cigarette carton that says, smoking cigarettes could be dangerous to your health. There could be
Seeing
entering this patient's, this doctor's office could be dangerous to your health.
Well, it's like
they should have that sign.
It's like the dentist who shot the lion. I mean, people, lined up outside his office and protested. And
Yeah, but that was more of a potentially some sort of
Right.
a gaming thing or some hobby.
Right.
This is someone that really has an issue with practicing good medicine
Right.
and exposing nice people to serious dangers,
Right.
including death. I mean, this person came to the United States, deliver a baby, had money, was willing to pay for the best quality of care, and is allowed to bleed to death
I
in
know.
the United States? How
Right.
can that happen? And the guy goes home and doesn't call? He left this patient and doesn't call?
you mentioned there was some similar. He's got a background.
At
some
least
other-
one other that I'm aware of.
doing a similar thing where he's sort of abandoned. Well, that's my word for it.
Yeah.
Well, malpractice, medical malpractice. You hear a lot of doctors talk about one of the reasons doctors are getting out of the profession or not wanting to go into it as much as the cost of malpractice insurance. I know attorneys have malpractice insurance also, right? And that's
We do.
astronomical. But I guess it's the double-edged sword of you got to have the insurance to protect yourself when you're a doctor, because for as many cases like this where it looks like there was a problem here. Talk about, if you would, there's a lot of medical malpractice cases that maybe aren't as legitimate as this one.
I don't believe that. I've heard
Or
that.
that was
but
my question.
I know
yeah.
people feel that way.
Right.
I accept that. I've heard that from people that I respect. But you have to understand, to prosecute a medical malpractice case is expensive.
It's very expensive.
People like me don't want to waste their money.
Right.
Why would I invest $20,000, $30,000 of my money for a case that has little or no merit?
Right.
And my time.
Right.
And the respect to the court system and the
Right.
judge. So I have a lot of concerns that that's not really a valid theory, that there's a lot of cases out there with little or no merit
Right.
against doctors.
Well, you hear that from doctors who complain about the cost of malpractice insurance, because they're saying that, for instance, I have a family member who's a anesthesiologist, and several times he's had people make false claims that something happened that didn't happen. So he talks about how the cost of his insurance goes up. Now, there are people that would say, malpractice attorneys are causing their rates to go up so high for doctors. But again, in this case, like you just won, if it weren't for you, where would this guy go? He'd have no recourse.
Well, let's start with it. Everybody should be responsible for the harm they cause somebody.
Right.
I don't care if it's a doctor, an accountant, an attorney, a news person.
Right.
Everybody's responsible if they hurt somebody. I don't think anybody gets a free ride. But going back to your example, that troubles me is your relative who's an anesthesiologist. If he wasn't responsible, and they didn't pay anything because he's not responsible, why does insurance rates go up? They didn't pay any money. So
He
I'm
was saying
missing
every
something.
time they make a claim, when someone makes a claim, even if it turns out to be false, he has to pay a higher rate
Why?
of insurance. Well, I
don't think that's true.
I think that's the problem with the insurance companies.
That doesn't make sense to me.
Okay.
Logically, it makes no sense to me. I'm going to charge you more. I haven't paid any more to provide you the same coverage I did last year.
Right. But do you believe that there are people that will purposely make false claims?
There's
against
exceptions to
doctors?
every rule.
Right.
You and I both know you never say never,
Right.
all right? And you never say
Right.
always. But would you say that 97% of the attorneys out there wouldn't do that? I would agree to 97%. I would never say 99% of the
Okay.
attorneys. There's bad people in every profession.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's people that maybe don't like doctors or this particular doctor, so they're
So they
doing
have
it
an
for
out
other
them.
reasons.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, what is your take on? There seems to be a lot of people we had a lot of Twitter followers who wrote questions about attorneys, not in this case, we're just talking generically in California, attorneys who make deals with each other when there's mediations or there's arbitrations, that a lot of times going into situations, because I don't know, in a case like this, does it ever get to a point where you don't get to trial, you'll do an arbitration or a mediation?
Statistically, most cases in California, I think, get resolved
Prior
to court, because if you try every case, there wouldn't be enough courtrooms, right? And it'd be terribly expensive. But I'm not sure I heard what you said, because I've been to many, many, many mediations,
Right.
arbitrations, and you were suggesting that before that there's some sort of collusion?
Yeah.
No, I'm telling you, 30 years,
So you don't.
and I know everybody.
If that happens, that is definitely
it doesn't happen.
It happened to me.
It doesn't happen in medical
at
mal.
jams. Here
Well,
in
I've
Los
never been to
Angeles.
jams anymore. I haven't used jams in 30 years, but I can tell you with all the people I know that do medical malpractice, nobody has collusion.
Okay.
Nobody.
Well, that's good.
You may have a different question as whether we go to a mediation in good faith, whether we intend to actually try to settle the case, or we're wasting everybody's time.
Right.
But there's no collusion.
Or I think the question is more about, a lot of times the attorneys will know ahead of time how the mediation is going to go before they get in there. They know that we're going to pay this amount of money, and this is what we know we're going to pay, and let's just go through the motion of the mediation and get to the final number.
Well, I can't tell you.
You can't speak for all attorneys.
I can just say I've spoken to a lot of people about the subject.
Right.
And then there's two theories, right? One theory is that defendants want a mediation for two purposes. They want to know from the plaintiff's perspective what evidence do you have.
Right.
Like, I'm going to pull down my pants and show them my own evidence,
Got
right?
it, yeah.
For free.
Right.
Or they would hope that the attorney doesn't have the ability to control his client, so they're hoping that the arbitrator or another party will compel or force the plaintiff to take less than he really wants. So
Got
now
it.
we have another person telling him, well, your case isn't really worth that.
Right.
Why don't you take this?
Got it.
So you get the attorney and the mediator. Whether the other case where it's really a situation where we have a neutral party listening to everybody and saying, what would be a fair resolution based upon these facts? I think it's maybe about 10 to 15% of the time, if not less, because you're dealing with insurance companies.
Right.
And the person who they bring to the mediation doesn't have the power anyways.
Right.
They're just a messenger.
Right.
If you're talking about a case, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million case, you're going to have someone who's the president of a major insurance company.
Right.
And of course, they're not showing up to meet
They're
with
not,
me.
right.
Who even knows how many people at the in the insurance companies know
Right.
about this particular verdict?
Well, what do you think about I just threw out jams. There's many different kinds of arbitration places, but do you believe that's a good place? Because here's my problem with places like that is you have retired judges. In my case, it was a retired judge who all judges were former attorneys. I think, right? Most.
No, but the example that you're trying to say is I have a fair amount of cases with Kaiser. Because I believe Kaiser has some real issues the way they practice medicine.
I think a lot of people.
Okay.
know.
I have some real concerns that they're having a lot of people that aren't qualified doing things.
Right.
And they have, if you have a claim against Kaiser, you have to go to arbitration. That's the
You
deal.
have to.
That's part of the contract.
It's like written in the contract.
It is the contract. So now you have, and they try to, revise it a little because it was so lopsided. So now they try to make it appear neutral. But you have judges, and let's assume, pick a number of this, 5,000, 10,000 arbitrations a year. Well, nobody wants to be on the bad list of Kaiser because then they'll never use you.
Right.
So if you come up with a verdict, like in this case,
Right.
if an arbitrator awarded my clients $17 million, there's no chance that Kaiser would ever use them again.
Got it.
That person would be removing
Off the
themselves
list.
from the ability to make income
Right.
from that source.
Right.
And it's really hard for nobody wants to remove income. Everybody wants
Right.
to be able
Well,
to keep
it's
they want to keep
it's a
everybody
business.
happy.
Right. Right. Well, last question about that. Do you feel that there is a because what I ran into in my situation was the attorney for the other side had been in front of this particular arbitrator I don't know, 3 or 4 times a week. She had an office at Jams and had her shoes in there, and so there's a conflict of interest sometimes with that. So that is and in talking to people after my case, California just seems to be a really tough state to have attorneys sanctioned. You almost have to murder someone or commit a crime to get sanctioned by the bar. But that's a whole other, that's
I can't
you're not here to
comment
speak for
upon
the
that.
bar.
I'm not here to speak for the bar. I don't know everybody. I'm sure in my profession people do things that they shouldn't do.
Right.
Just as in other professions. And from what little I know, I think they get in trouble for doing that.
Right.
All right.
So now I had an attorney actually say to me recently that the law is not a science, it's an art. I was speaking to attorneys like, well, Jasper, because I had some questions about the law says this, and this is what this says this, and he goes, oh, well, law is kind of like what you do, Jasper. You're an actor, and it's really like an art, and it's malleable, and you have to. And I was sort of thinking, really, I thought when the law is written a certain way, that's what it means. But this attorney was telling me there's room, and you play around with it.
Well,
and
there's law that's supposed to be black and white. Then
Right.
you're applying facts to a specific law.
Right.
So how you argue the facts,
that's
and how
where
you apply that law to those facts, it's the old adage from the attorney say, when the facts are against you, argue the law.
got it.
When the facts and the law are against you, just argue. All right? So can they confuse a judge or a jury, sometimes a skillful attorney,
Right.
not to follow the law? I guess so. People get confused.
In this particular case that we were just talking about, did you poll the jury? Do you know how it?
It was, I think, some of the questions was 11-1.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's fantastic.
Well, I don't understand how one person could.
Well, that was my
I'm
whole
troubled.
thing. You're
How
like
could anybody?
You're like, let me talk to that one person and find
well,
out.
I mean, you can't. I mean, people are what they are. They come up with their own biases and prejudice, and they hear the evidence the way they want to hear.
Right.
It's like sunglasses. They see what they want to see, and it's.
Well,
it's
do you believe a lot of it is in jury selection also? That's a huge part of
Well, no,
picking.
actually, of course.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it comes down to having a fair judge. And in this case, the judge was very fair. His entire attitude from the beginning: you walk into my courtroom, you're going to get a fair trial. Everybody's getting a fair trial. I don't care if you're here from New York. I don't care if you're from Los Angeles County. I don't care if you're here from China. We treat everybody fairly and the same. And that's the judge's philosophy from the get-go. And I think that was picked up by the jury that despite my client coming from China,
Right.
and despite the fact that she was here and had a baby, and there's been a lot of politics about this, it had no influence.
Bearings on the
I don't think so. I actually think the jury was very fair, and they wanted to do the right thing.
Did you know this judge before? Had you
Never had a case with him before.
Right.
But he was a very, very good judge. He was a very fair judge. You
Right.
know, he was one of the best judges I've ever had the pleasure of working
Oh,
with.
that's nice. You want to tell his name?
Yeah, it was Judge DeCesar in Orange
In
County
Orange
Superior
County
Court,
Superior-
C16.
Where can people, by the way, find you and get in contact
Well, I have a
with you?
website.
Yeah.
It's medicalmalpractice-la.com. But
Okay.
I guess today they can Google Neil Howard.
Neil
Or
Howard.
they could Google medical malpractice Los Angeles, or
Right.
maybe even medical malpractice.
So you have some big cases coming up?
I have some interesting cases. I have some big cases.
You have
I
one-
mean, some stupid cases. They're all crazy cases. I have a case that a woman goes in and she wants to get pregnant. and she's been unable to get pregnant. So she goes to a fertility care specialist. I mean, you're willing to spend that kind of money. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it can be $10,000-$20,000.
I have several girlfriends who have gone through it.
Very expensive.
Yeah.
And it's very stressful.
Yeah.
So this individual wants to go through the expense, the time to get pregnant, has embryos implanted. Okay?
Right.
Astonishing story. Sunday. So this is done on the weekday. Doctor calls her up Sunday, you have to come to the office right now. Comes to the office. Performs a DNC because he put the wrong embryos in.
Oh my God.
On a Sunday, without even giving her a chance that you want to do this, essentially have an abortion. You come to my office, this woman that wants to get pregnant and have an abortion.
Spend money and
right? Could you imagine how much trauma that would be emotionally to somebody?
Did he tell her he had done the wrong? Did he tell her why he was doing? I mean,
I don't think he was honest at all. This was astonishing. I have another case that's set for trial in December. Someone younger than us happens to go to the doctor just for a routine checkup, and they do a blood test. And in your blood test, we call it in the word CBC, complete blood count. It's just they do everything. Hemoglobin tells you how much blood you have. It was almost next to zero. Right? It was astonishing low, scary low, almost to the point where I'm saying that you got to send this person almost by ambulance to the hospital. He's that sick. Right? So they get the result. What do?
Nothing.
Nothing. They don't even put it in the chart. They don't even call the person. Comes back the next week to get the blood test result. Sees a different doctor. The result's not even in the chart. They tell him, oh, we just have an ear infection. 3 weeks later, he is
dying.
Dead.
Oh, he died.
Dead. 41-year-old man. Dead. From something that's curable. I mean, this is Los Angeles County. It's scary. It scares me. You know, almost the point, one of the problems of being a medical malpractice attorney and hearing all these cases, when I start to have problems, I start to think I'm going to be like him.
Well, sure.
What's my hemoglobin?
You don't want to go to the doctor after that.
Let me see the hemoglobin
I'm sure
test.
when you go to the doctor, you have a lot of questions.
Well, you have to trust people.
Or they know what you do they know what you do for a living.
No,
so.
because then they wouldn't treat me.
Right. You don't tell them. Well, yeah, it's interesting because I'm always fascinated by what brings people to their professions, and because I'm an actor and I'm in show business, and in a lot of ways. First of all, do you watch all the David Kellys? Were you a big fan of like the law shows in LA Law and all that stuff?
What is the Suits? There's a show Suits now.
Suits right now
Suits,
on USA.
Yeah,
you like that? I mean, it's all like dramatized or whatever.
Of course, it's not real yet.
But I think lawyers in a lot of ways are like actors. You have to be good in front of a
People
jury.
think that way, but there's
but
a
you're
lot of truth.
charismatic.
But I think a lot of things you have to be is prepared. You have to really be willing to put the time in.
Right.
That's a huge part
so
of
much
the job.
research and so much time goes in.
I mean, you could reread everything 4 times.
How many people are in your firm? How many?
4 people.
Just 4.
Yeah.
So you really do it all.
Yeah.
You guys are
busy.
How many cases can you take at a time?
I would say no more than 60.
Wow.
So that's how we can pick and choose.
And like you said, a lot of the goal
because they
is
all become family. My clients are almost family.
Right.
I spend so much time with them.
And a lot of them don't get to trial, which, you settle, which is a good point. That's a goal you'd like to get to.
Well, some people don't want to go to court.
Right. I didn't.
Right.
In my case.
It's stressful.
Right.
But of course, on those sides, it's stressful for them as well.
Right. And that's a good point. There's that whole theory about when the client may not want to go to trial, but the attorneys are looking at this going, well, we've got a great case here. You'd be better off, stick with us. We're going to take it to trial. That's sort of a dilemma sometimes.
But ultimately, the client makes the decision.
Right.
It's the client's case. The
Right.
State Bar would tell you this.
Right.
I can only give people choices. Ultimately, they make the decision what they want to do with their case. And,
Right.
and the attorney has to accept that. Even if I've had cases where I didn't like the decision. But
but you had to.
It's their case. It's their decision.
So in your community here in LA, of all the attorneys who know each other, this is the thing I'm really fascinated about and then there's no judgment. I think it's fascinating that you guys, you go up against each other, you know each other, it's just like athletes who play on a team, play against each other, and then you may be friends outside or
sometimes,
but
not all the time.
But I'm fascinated by that because in a good way, because a lot of people would say, well, I don't like that because they're buddies, but yet they're trying against each other. And
we can respect our adversaries.
Right.
And we can have friendship with adversaries. I mean, but when we're in court, we have an obligation to do the best we can for our clients and to prepare It's not personal.
I mean, it kind of is like a sporting event without making it. I'm not making it light of it, but in terms of there's two teams, there's this team and that team, and there's respect for each other, but you're there to do a job, and it's kind of a battle, and you have to sort of. It's like a chess match. It's very much like chess.
You have to anticipate what moves they're going to make,
right?
And you have to be prepared for it.
But isn't that what's fascinating for you? Isn't that the exciting part of it sometimes?
First of all, the exciting thing is you never know what's going to happen.
Right.
You don't know what day.
Right.
What's going to happen. You don't know what your client's going to say.
Right.
You don't know what the judge is going to say. You don't know how the jury is accepting the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even know what your experts are going to even show up on time, let alone what they're going to say. There's
Right.
so many variables that go on.
So every and then every case is different.
It's very exciting.
Yeah. Was
not
it
always good way exciting, but it's exciting. It's stressful. It's high stress.
Yeah. So was there a backup plan if you weren't going to be an attorney? I know you were CPA, and then
No.
You didn't
I
want to be.
guess I'd have to be an actor. We work with you, help you.
Did you really
You
ever?
would've
No.
I'm not as talented as you.
Well, you're right here on the lot.
Yeah,
I mean, you're very, charismatic, and so
Thank you.
Yeah,
but you're
yeah.
the only one that says that.
No, come on, that's not true. Well, listen, I can't thank you enough
My
for
pleasure.
doing this, and everyone again, tell everyone your website again.
medicalmalpractice-la.com.
Neil Howard. So if any doctor do you feel has done something wrong to you, this is a guy to call right here. Thanks, buddy.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Have
Good
a
luck
great
with
evening.
everything.
Thank you again.
Okay, and we will be right back. Thank you so much.
You're back one-on-one with Jasper Cole.
Right. Howdy, and welcome back to One-on-One with Jasper Cole. And we want to thank again our guest, Mr. Neil Howard, for educating us on the law. Now, a lot of you know, I was speaking a little bit to him about the fact that I was involved in a 5 to 6 year entertainment lawsuit here in Los Angeles. So I think we went through 4 different law firms, JW.
Wow.
We ended up having to sue 3 of the law firms that we had. And ironically, as Neil was leaving, he mentioned a particular law firm do you remember? He mentioned a particular law firm happens to be one of the law firms that screwed up our case, and we had to go and settle with them as well. So
he wasn't surprised either.
that kind of made me feel a lot better hearing that. Well, in a sad way, it made me feel better that we weren't wrong about this particular attorney, but it's sad that this particular attorney is still working and taking other people's money. And I think that's the thing. I was going into this interview today. You know how I feel about attorneys because I've had such a.
I was like, this should be interesting.
I've had such a love-hate relationship because I've had such a horrible relationship with attorneys, and it just seemed like our luck was these were prominent, as you heard me mentioning some of the names to Neil, some really big law firms, and they were just in our situation. I'm just saying in my situation. The mistakes that were made, it's really legal malpractice, and he reps, medical malpractice. So the thing I didn't get into it with him is it's so hard for other attorneys to sue other attorneys. So when we had to file a lawsuit against a particular law firm, just finding a law firm that would take on a legal malpractice case, that was hard in itself. And that whole fraternizing thing that I was speaking about with him, I guess that's the weirdest thing for me is how in a town, be it LA or a small town, so all the attorneys get to know each other. They've worked on cases together. They backslap each other and they play golf at the country club together. And I guess that for me, I don't know how they skirt that line of conflict of interest. Right. That they all get to know each other, but yet. And what I was trying to talk to him about is when you go to mediations, arbitrations, and he kind of hinted on the fact that the judges in cases, they want to keep working, so they're not going to always award these huge amounts. And so it's almost like a ping pong match that goes back and forth.
It seems like it's a lot of a game.
And in my situation, JAMS, which is one of the largest arbitration companies in the world, we're one of the few people that were able to actually ever file a claim against an actual arbitration firm and have a settlement, because they never admit to anything. But thanks to my former manager, who was so dogged about the whole thing and never let it go, we were able to do that. So have you had any experience with attorneys along the way?
I have, but
anything negative?
Not really. I had one one I didn't think was prepared, and literally contacted me a day before court, to go in, and I was like, there's a huge
night
medical
court
records to look at, blah, blah,
Richard
blah.
Mole and Marky Post.
Yeah, so
that's the other good point. I noticed. I know in our case, looking back, you almost have to be your own paralegal. And in my case, I had a former manager who practically became a paralegal.
Yeah, you pretty much work with the team before you ever really get any words with the actual attorney themselves.
And like he mentioned how many cases he has.
Yeah.
When you think about it, it's kind of like an actor who has an agent and they have like all these different clients. It's like you have to be your own advocate even when you have an attorney. And, I want to say to people, my biggest thing is I would say to you is he said it today, the client always has the last word, but that's not always easy when you're working with attorneys and they want you to take something to trial, but you want to settle, you don't want to go to trial. They're at times you're pressured and they want you to forego settlement offers along the way because trust me, they'd say, trust me, if we get to trial, we're going to win big. And like Neil was saying, there's no guarantee when you get to trial. But my whole problem is when people, and he mentioned that Kaiser, all the employees have to sign contracts that automatically send you to arbitration.
Yeah.
The problem with that means they can never sue. They can never sue their employers. And even with other companies now, JAMS, I mentioned JAMMS. If you look on a lot of your employee contracts, JAMS has like a monopoly on arbitration and mediation in the state and in the country. So just be aware a lot of times when you sign these contracts, look in the very tiny fine print about arbitrations. Because when you get into these arbitrations, you're dealing with retired judges that were former attorneys, that a lot of the attorneys that you're using have either worked with, know them, have worked with them. In our case, it's a situation where our attorney would say, oh yeah, I've been up against this attorney. She beat me last time, so she owes me this time. It's almost like you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back, scratch your back. So all I'm saying is I went into all this thinking that the attorneys were all on the up and up and it wasn't a game and it was all about like doctors take their oath and attorneys take an oath that they're there to uphold justice, and ultimately it is a business and they want to make money. And we didn't get into this either. A lot of times they will look at the merit of your case. In our situation, it was a very high profile case, and a smaller firm will forego some huge amount of money just to have the prestige of having your case, getting their name in the Hollywood Reporter or whatever. And your case brings so many other cases to them. They don't really give a shit what kind of settlement they get for you at that point. They're almost doing a favor sometimes for the other side.
So publicity.
Because they know each other. But when this particular attorney said to me, Jasper, it's really not a science, it's an art, I almost passed out because we were questioning him on a very specific law that says blah, blah, blah. And he goes, oh, well. And then he was talking about, he said to me, well, Jasper, I pick cases like you pick projects. Sometimes you do the studio pictures for the money, and then other times you find these nice little these indie films that you do just for the merit of the part. And I'm sitting there looking at my partner and I looking at each other like, what the fuck is he talking about? I thought, and then what I didn't get into with him is, yes, when you do try to file claims against attorneys in the state of California, they have so many laws that protect attorneys in this state. And don't forget, most of everyone that's running the state bar are other attorneys.
Right.
So basically, it's attorneys policing attorneys. I don't know how it is with the medical state bar. It's California. I'm just going to assume it's probably just as corrupt. So, but speaking of corrupt, I want to talk about these ridiculous Republican candidates that are crying and whining while we have enough time here about these. Did you hear this? They're boycotting the next NBC debate. They want to make up their own rules. They don't want to play by the rules they were claiming. Now, look, I have to agree. The last debate last week, I did believe CNBC, they really asked some lame-ass questions. But even as President Obama's been saying lately in the press, hey, guys, if you can't handle CNBC's question, how the hell are you going to deal with Putin or, any, South Korea or North Korea or any of these people? So, I don't know. I just thought it was hilarious. But the other thing that scares me, hello, Republicans, Ben Carson is now leading.
Yeah.
And but confident. I mean, honestly, I kind of between Trump and Carson,
Mm-hmm.
Carson scares me less in some ways, and then more than Trump in others. But I don't think either one can beat Hillary.
No.
So I don't know why the Republicans have just gone batshit crazy this time. I mean, I think ultimately, if you're going to pick anybody, you're going to have to pick like maybe Bush and Rubio, because at least Bush brings experience and Rubio brings, a freshness, and he's kind of hot. Everyone thinks he's good looking and he's Spanish, so whatever. Well, listen, guys, I think that's it for today. Stay with us for next week. As always, we'll have a great surprise, and we never know. We like to surprise you. Again, follow us on Twitter at 101jcole, Facebook, and website, and go to our host page and buy some shit from the advertisers. Peace out, everyone. Have a great rest of the week. You've been listening and watching 101 with Jasper Cole. Bye.
Thanks for checking out One-on-One with Jasper Cole. Check out past episodes and get the latest as they're released. Subscribe today on iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube.